I can see the critical hits. They're everywhere. I saw the future. It's filled with 20s. Hey Growl fans, it's me again, Victor Salinas. And today I wanted to talk to you about something that's very important in my life, and I know it's something that's very important in your life from what I've heard from a couple of you. And that is role-playing games. I'm talking about like tabletop role-playing games like this game right here. I'm sure many of you are familiar with this as perhaps the most famous tabletop role-playing game. I would say not to be overshadowed by my favorite, right here. I won't get into a debate as to why. Maybe in a different video we can discuss that. But before we get started, I'd like to invite everyone watching to head over to the Growelt website to growelt.com/free. You can get a free ebook preview of this book right here. All you have to do is plug in your email address and hit the button, and you'll get that automatically. You also get email updates on new short stories, contests, polls, that sort of thing that we do. You'll get that automatically just for setting up with your email address. I'll put the URL in the description of the video and also in the video itself. Again, I'd like to invite everyone seeing this. Just head over to that URL and punch in your email address. It just takes a second, and you'll get that ebook preview for free. So for me, role-playing games have always served a higher purpose. In the ages of like 9 until just a few years ago, where all my friends all of a sudden I guess were too mature or something to start playing, or they had lives or girlfriends or kids or whatever, you know, that lame stuff that doesn't matter. So from those ages, from let's say 9 to 24, 25, I played religiously, like that was my religion. Sundays I wasn't at church, I was rolling characters and smashing in orcs' heads and and that sort of thing. So I've played many tens of thousands of hours of role-playing games, and they've been such an integral part of not just, you know, my pastimes and entertainment, but also now, looking back on it, I can draw so much influence in my daily life, and especially as a writer, how playing those role-playing games has influenced me for the better. So for me, as a fan of fantasy and sci-fi, the most important thing to me is not necessarily the characterization. Well, of course we should have characters that we identify with very strongly, that forms an emotional bond. To me, and to many of my friends in the past, the most important part of any fantasy or sci-fi story or setting was how open-ended it was. And we always put new settings to the test, and the test was, can we RPG it? Can we form a campaign setting? Can we make characters? Is there enough open space in this universe for us to take part in? You know, when I was younger, a big thing was like Buffy the Vampire Slayer and The X-Files, and a lot of those TV shows, and I could never get into those, I think, for that same reason. Now, while I believe there are role-playing games based on both of those franchises that I'm using as an example, they never really took off. Certainly not as big as, say, like Star Wars or the many iterations of the Lord of the Rings role-playing game. And I believe that is because those universes are too closed-ended. There's too much that's already decided. There's a very narrow channel through which things can happen. And outside of the main characters, you really don't have a universe in which, you know, say you and I can participate in. So that was always our test, like, can you RPG it? Can I insert myself as my own unique character into this universe? Can that universe still exist with, you know, infinite number of newcomers and not dismantle the entire thing? That's really what made me such a huge fan of things like The Lord of the Rings, Star Wars, and Dune. Those are my 3 big favorite fantasy sci-fi franchises, and in each one of those, the world is certainly very well thought up and dreamt up and fleshed out, and you know, you can see it operating as a separate entity from our own universe. But as well thought out and structured as it is, they're so open-ended, there's so much, especially Star Wars is always my favorite role-playing universe. It's so gigantic that it can absorb any number of new characters and new happenings, and the universe will still continue to hum along as normal. And that's really what made me fall in love with Star Wars. I was a fan of Star Wars since I was a kid, but once I get old enough, you know, 11, 12 years old, and we started playing the West End game, Star Wars role-playing game, that's when I went from liking Star Wars to falling in love with it. I mean, it became like maybe even an unhealthy obsession of mine that I would just dream constantly about being in the Star Wars universe, and it made me want more and more, and I read, you know, all the Wikipedia articles, as it's called. That website is still going, and I still check that out from time to time, but like every comic book and book I get my hands on, I would use in the campaigns that we would play, and then the campaigns that we would play would make me want even more Star Wars material. So it was just this huge virtuous cycle as far as I'm concerned, that you know, the more I got involved in the universe itself, the more I wanted to find out about it, and vice versa, and it just kept going and going. And my friends and I were the same way, and we knew a lot of people that were the same way. And I would venture to say that at least a very sizable minority, like the really hardcore Star Wars fans, were exactly the same way with the role-playing part of it. So that, to me, is the standard of whether I think I go from liking something okay to really being in love with it, is can I role-play in it? Is the universe, one, well fleshed out enough, and two, large enough for my friends and I to be able to get into ourselves and, you know, sink our teeth into and take part of. You know, most of the fun, I would think, for a lot of us happens not right when we're consuming the material, not right when we're reading the book or watching the show or the movie. It happens afterwards. It happens when we think about the message, when we think about the events, when we wonder what if, like, what was really the cause of that, what will happen after the camera shuts off or after the last page in the book. And it's so much fun to speculate about that yourself and also share your speculations with your friends. I mean, you know, reading the first Dune novel, it's quite lengthy. It's 500 some pages, and it, you know, takes a number of hours to read, but I've derived so much more satisfaction and fun thinking and talking about it with other people than I did reading it. Like a really good piece of artwork, a video game, a movie, a TV show, a book, is just a conversation starter. Most of the fun happens outside the consumption of the media itself. And I think the test of whether it can be role-played or not will determine how successful or how much it will draw people in, I think. And that's something that I've tried to keep in mind as I'm writing the Grauwelt series and planning out, you know, future novels that I want to write throughout my entire lifetime. That's something that I always keep deep in here and in here as I'm working, is this universe big enough for people to insert themselves? Like, I've always been enthralled with that concept of a separate universe that someone made up that other people can enjoy, because, you know, George Lucas and Frank Herbert and Tolkien were so kind enough to all of us to give us a universe in which we could live. And you know, my greatest aspiration is to one day find a way to do that, create a setting in which other people can involve themselves. And I think that's not just fun, it's not just entertaining, it's also educational. I've said this before in videos and articles that I've written, is that, you know, fiction serves a very important purpose to give us a setting outside of what we would normally expect. And I think it's that sort of quality, that otherworldliness, that sometimes, you know, bizarreness, if you will, that occurs in these fictional settings. It takes that for us to be able to learn a really valuable lesson that we can use in the real world. I mean, maybe you might not care about famine or war or destruction or inequity in society until you see it in a fictional setting, until you see it so huge and exaggerated that you have no choice but to grapple with it in your real life. I mean, that's the way that I look at fiction. And it's not saying that every piece of fiction needs to have a message like that. It certainly shouldn't. It's not always tasteful to do so, but that is the ultimate power of fiction, is it's so emotive that it can make us look at the real world in an entirely new way. And I think that if the setting is large and fleshed out enough that you can insert yourself into it, it just makes that process so much easier and so much more fun. So again, my favorite role-playing scenario has usually been the Star Wars game. I'll have to make other videos if you guys are interested about role-playing. I could just go on and on and on about that. I'd like you to tell me in the comments what's your favorite role-playing scenario or setting or game. I've played it all. I've played, you know, D&D. I've played a lot of the White Wolf D10 games. I've played a lot of D6 stuff. I've even played Rifts. I have a couple of Rifts books in here. Rifts kind of sucks if you've ever played that. But enough about that stuff. Tell me what your favorite role-playing setting, scenario, or game is. And if you haven't done it, let me know in the comments, and maybe I can make a few recommendations on how to get started. It is a really awesome hobby. It's really awesome because it doesn't cost very much to play. I mean, if you don't even need any of the books if you know someone that has them. At most, it might set you back $35, $40 to get a basic rule book to play, and a few dollars for some dice, and then you can derive like infinite amount of entertainment, not just reading the books themselves, but also playing the games. So I think it's really worth it. I'd like to remind everyone to head over to the Growelt website at growelt.com/free to get a free ebook preview of this book right here. All you have to do is pop in your email address and press the button, and you'll get this sent to you automatically. And you'll also be signed up for email updates, so you'll get email updates on new videos, short stories, contests and polls and giveaways and things that we do on the website. I'll put the URL in the video description and also in the video itself. Don't forget to rate and share this video if you liked it, and subscribe to the Growelt channel. I'll talk to you guys next time.